With the WINN News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories: navigating the tides of climate finance, St. Kitts and Nevis at Global Sustainability Forums. St. Kitts and Nevis Defence Force partnership bolsters inmate rehabilitation efforts. Autopsy reveals cause of death in Pons Pasha fatal shooting. Port lessons for Jamaica from China. CDB annual meeting ends with strong call for regional resilience. Internationally, Israeli public united in mission to halt Iran's nuclear program. Now, the details. The global stage has recently witnessed St. Kitts and Nevis at the forefront of critical discussions on climate finance and sustainable development with the Honourable Dr. Joel Clark, Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, championing the unique needs of small island developing states, SIDS. Her interventions at the Hamburg Sustainability Conference and the United Nations Oceans Conference has underscored the profound challenges small island developing states face in accessing crucial funding, while also highlighting the interlinked nature of global environmental and economic issues. The heart of the challenge for SIDS lies in the existing international financial architecture, which often fails to account for their inherent vulnerabilities adequately. During a session at the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, Minister Clark articulated this critical disconnect, emphasizing the pressing need for accessible and appropriate financing mechanisms.
The reality on the ground is that we have to deal with poverty. We have serious percentage of our budget is in social protection, and we have to transition not just our economy, but we have to be more climate resilient. To do that, we need faster access to green financing. We need some risk sharing mechanisms. We need to ensure that there is co-financing and grant-based financing, concessional financing. Oftentimes, we sit in meetings and we hear, there's funding available, but not for St. Kitts and Nevis, not for Antigua and Barbuda, not for Barbados, and that's a problem. And we understand that the challenge is how we assess vulnerabilities. And that's why our CARICOM leaders are pushing for the adoption of the MVI. Look at our vulnerabilities more holistically, but also at our assets. Multi-dimensional vulnerability index, which it uses more than just the GDP as an indicator of your status.
This sentiment was echoed by Peter Cripps, editor of Environmental Finance, who directly questioned categorization of these nations. Axel van Trotzenberg, senior managing director at the World Bank, acknowledged this as
a really serious problem for island countries,
noting that the conventional metric of gross domestic product, GDP, per capita often presents a misleading picture of their economic reality. Barbados, for instance, with a per capita GDP of $22,000, faces a starkly different reality on the ground. This traditional assessment method means SIDS are frequently ineligible for concessional finance despite being on the front lines of the climate crisis. The disproportionate impact of natural disasters further exacerbates the situation. Hurricanes and typhoons can inflict damages ranging from 10% to the staggering 60% of a SIDS GDP, leading to dire consequences for their debt situations and trapping them in a vicious cycle.
So we have been trying to deal, particularly in the Pacific, we have made all the countries IDA eligible. We've been trying to do that also with a certain number of countries in the Caribbean, but not everybody is accepting from the donors that other countries could be IDA eligible. And that is a problem for these countries. Because they are hit regularly by hurricanes or typhoons. And then the damage is not 0.5% of GDP. You talk about 10 to 50, 60% of GDP in damages. And that has, of course, huge consequences on their debt situation. So they get into a vicious circle.
Shared Axel van Trotzenberg, Senior Managing Director of the World Bank. This acute vulnerability necessitates a shift towards a more comprehensive assessment tool, such as the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, MVI, which considers economic, environmental, and social risks beyond mere income levels. The United Nations General Assembly formally adopted the MVI framework in August 2024, marking a significant step after decades of advocacy from small island developing states. The MVI aims to capture exogenous vulnerabilities and a lack of resilience to external shocks, ensuring a more credible and comparable assessment of needs. Minister Clark emphasized that for co-financing to be truly effective, it must come with results-based financing and a sustained presence of experts within national systems. This approach, she noted, could finally allow nations like St. Kitts and Nevis to access the financing needed to transform their economies and contribute to global benefits. She highlighted the critical need for an injection of concessional financing, possibly in the billions, to facilitate the transition to renewable energy, specifically geothermal power, which could solve challenges related to water, food, and manufacturing costs. While commitments from the Green Climate Fund, GCF, and the Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, are a start, the scale of investment required necessitates a collaborative effort involving private sector money and World Bank financing. St. Kitts and Nevis is committed to this transformative journey, aiming to become a fully sustainable island state by 2040 through a comprehensive 7-pillar system. The vision encompasses reliable, affordable, and clean energy, increased local food production, a circular economy with zero waste, diversified and resilient sectors, and infrastructure designed to withstand the impacts of climate change. The nation has already taken concrete steps, including initiating a 3-phase ban on single-use plastics and spearheading a national recycling program. The recent engagements, including Minister Clark's participation at the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, have underscored the critical interlinkages within multilateral spaces. Whether the focus is on protecting marine ecosystems, accelerating renewable energy transition, or fostering a just and circular path to sustainability, progress in one area fundamentally supports progress in all of them. The conference served as a meaningful step towards cultivating deeper alliances and delivering results-oriented solutions across countries and continents. Minister Clark's robust advocacy was also seen at the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice, France, where she led the Federation's delegation, emphasizing the existential threat that climate change poses to SIDS. She stressed that the urgent need for localized climate financing for coastal communities and called for adaptive bottom-up financing approaches that empower local actors as leaders in climate response. Further, she underscored the importance of solid legislative frameworks, meaningful partnerships regionally, and strong community engagement for the success of marine protected areas, asserting that conservation is not just about protection, it's about prosperity. During the conference, St. Kitts and Nevis also became a signatory to the Agreement on Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, BBNJ, also known as the High Seas Treaty, reinforcing the nation's commitment to multilateralism in safeguarding global marine biodiversity. Prime Minister, the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew, offered congratulations to Minister Clark for her outstanding leadership, noting that her, quote, timely interventions and strong representation ensured that our nation's voice was meaningfully heard on critical issues related to ocean sustainability and climate resilience, end quote. He commended her for her tireless advocacy and for successfully engaging regional and international partners on behalf of our people and our planet. This unwavering commitment to shaping a sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for its people and shared oceans demonstrates St. Kitts and Nevis's role as a bold and principled voice in global ocean and climate diplomacy. The vital partnership between His Majesty's Prison, HMP, and the St. Kitts and Nevis Defence Force, SKNDF, is set to continue, affirming the military agency's crucial role in inmate rehabilitation. This long-standing collaboration has been instrumental in equipping inmates with essential technical skills, thereby facilitating their successful reintegration into society and addressing the pressing issue of recidivism. On the June 4th, 2025 broadcast of In Focus, Major Coyote Sutton, the St. Kitts Nevis Defence Force Acting Commander, elaborated on the significant impact of the rehabilitation program. The initiative, which has spanned over a decade, provides comprehensive training in a variety of technical fields, including auto mechanics, welding, and agriculture. Inmates also receive instruction in construction, with their efforts contributing to various projects, such as the erection of buildings at Camp Springfield and the Coast Guard base. This hands-on experience allows inmates to learn valuable skills and contribute to tangible outcomes. Major Sutton underscored the transformative nature of the program.
The Defence Force has been collaborating with the prison. We are engaged in some rehabilitative work with inmates, and that has extended well over 10 years, probably going close to 20 now. We have prisoners that came who didn't know how to hold a screwdriver, and now they are able to break down vehicle engines and transmissions and rebuild them. They are welders, well-qualified welders within the His Majesty's prison, that learn welding at Camp Springfield. There are people that work in the farms as well, in our gardens, assist. Construction. If you notice, we have a number of buildings that have been erected at Camp Springfield and at the Coast Guard base as well. Most of those buildings were, erected by help from the prison. We have persons that are in prison that have those skills, and then they bring other persons who are interested, who are inmates, along, and they learn along the way. And a number of them have become highly qualified. So that is yielding a lot of results, and I'm very, very pleased with the turnout of the inmates that come to Camp Springfield and the achievements. When they have served their time, they're able to return to the society, and that helps to reduce the recidivism back into the prison, because they will be able to either start their own business, or they will be qualified enough to be able to get jobs within the labor force.
The program's success in reducing reoffending rates is a testament to its effectiveness. Principal Officer Charles Molyneux, speaking in April 2022, highlighted that the rehabilitation program has contributed to a significant reduction in the prison population with fewer reoffenders. He also noted that many former inmates have secured meaningful employment, reflecting the program's success in fostering productive lives after release. An autopsy has confirmed that 38-year-old Ricardo Marsham of Godwin Gut died from severe internal bleeding in his chest caused by gunshot wounds to his back. The procedure was carried out by resident pathologist Dr. Adrian Nunez, assisted by Dr. Nautica Phillip at the Joseph and France General Hospital mortuary. Following the autopsy, Marsham's body was released to his family for burial. The fatal shooting, which also left 41-year-old Terrence Richam of Tuckett Street, Ponds Pasture, injured, occurred on Friday, May 21st, 2025 at approximately 9:16 p.m. The formal charging of 23-year-old Zadik Butler of Keon with conspiracy to commit murder on May 27, 2025 represents a significant step in the pursuit of justice for the Marsham family and the wider community. Authorities emphasize that community cooperation remains crucial in combating violent crime and fostering a safer environment for all citizens. In regional news, port lessons for Jamaica from China, Television Jamaica reports.
One of the largest port operations in the world in China says it's making one of its terminals fully automated, and it has delivered increased efficiency. So could there be lessons for Jamaica, where transactions at the ports are often time-consuming? Details from Dwayne Anderson.
Port in Lining links the province with the outside world. Many vehicles from places like Japan pass through this port, but even this key transit point had to make changes at one of its terminals to become even better.
That is an airman port, smart port without no staff. Airman port. That terminal actually ranks the second in the world for the shipping companies like Costco as well as Maersk.
In Jamaica, our ports are often the butt of jokes, because many people often say when you go to the ports, it's a whole day operation to do almost any type of business. Now, I spoke to the authorities here in Lining Province in Dalian, where they have the second largest port operation in China. And they said, listen, we have an unmanned operation at our port, and this has transformed our operations. It is now one of the most efficient in the world. And they've made a suggestion that if Jamaica can do anything similar to that, we could get some progress in how efficiently we operate at our ports.
And from the seaport to the airport, the municipal leadership in Lining Province says it is opening up to the world and wants more tourists, including from Jamaica, to visit and enjoy its culture in cities such as Dalian. Visitors traveling into that city will also now have it easier to access services such as foreign currency exchange after exiting the airport.
In order to improve the life facilities and the convenience for the foreign nationals in Dalian, and the city's municipal people's government and foreign affairs follows the work deployment of the CPC Dalian Committee as well as the city's government, and collaborate with the series of departments to build Northeast China's first airport, one-stop service center for foreign nationals, and providing a high standard and multidimensional services for the entry and inbound foreign travelers.
When many people think of China, they think of all things mass production, from manufacturing, production, agriculture. After all, China is one of the world's leaders in production. But one thing they rarely think about when it comes to China is tourism. But if you ask the authorities in the country, China is open to tourists, just like Jamaica. Last month, Chinese authorities announced that 12 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean have been granted visa-free travel to China. Now, Jamaica has not been included in that number yet, but the authorities say that could change soon. Reporting from China, I'm Dwayne Anderson for TV News.
Kingston Wharves has announced temporary operational changes at its terminal due to a surge in vessel activity and higher than normal cargo volumes. In a statement, the company said adjustments were necessary to optimize space and ensure efficient cargo handling. As part of the temporary measures, KWL will suspend the practice of allowing external truckers to move a full container load cargo for scanning and stripping. During this period, external chassis will not be permitted to park on the terminal. Instead, KWL's operation team will handle all scanning and container movement using its own internal chassis. Containers will be delivered to warehouses for stripping only upon request from warehouse personnel.
CDB annual meeting ends with strong call for regional resilience. DBS St. Lucia has that story.
In the closing remarks, the president of the Caribbean Development Bank reflected on the region's resilience and vision, highlighting the urgent need for institutional reform, strategic partnerships, and long-term planning. The address emphasized that business as usual will not meet the moment, especially as climate shocks, tightening fiscal space, and global instability continue to threaten Caribbean development.
Over the past days, we confronted the hard truths, the structural and persistent inequalities and practice that undermine our progress, and the stark reality that business as usual will not do. As we examine the deepening impacts of climate shocks, the constraints of tightening fiscal space, and the volatility of a shifting global order, we did not hang our heads in hopelessness.
Over the week, delegates engaged in high-level dialogue on the transformation of the bank, regional integration, climate action, and expanding collaboration with Latin America. Key milestones included the signing of new agreements with CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, and France's AFD, aimed at boosting financial capacity and shared development goals.
These discussions addressed the transformation of the bank, the strengthening of institutional resilience, the expansion of collaboration with Latin America, the advance of shared region priorities, such as climate change, private sector engagement, and the promotion of economic competitiveness, and efforts to advance inclusion and long-term sustainability.
Brazil officially handed over the chairmanship of the Board of Governors to the Bahamas, which will host the 55th annual meeting in Nassau. Representing the incoming chair, the Honorable Wade Watson reaffirmed the Bahamas' commitment to climate resilience and praised the work done under Brazil's leadership.
Mrs. Vivian Becky Mendes Mueller of Brazil for the tremendous work over the past year as outgoing chair. Governor Mueller, thank you for your steady leadership and for your hospitality in hosting this year's annual meeting. The dialogue and discussions were fruitful and very productive.
As the meeting ended, leaders were urged to carry forward the momentum, nurture the seeds of innovation and reform, and continue shaping a Caribbean future that leaves no one behind. For the DBS News World, Manasseh Stanislas reporting.
We now bring you these international reports.
Speak to Dan Perry now, who's an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the Associated Press in the Middle East. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Welcome to Al Jazeera, Dan. So firstly, let me ask you this. What was it like to be at the receiving end of Iranian bombs on Friday evening? And what's the mood like there in the city now and nationwide?
I think there definitely is trepidation and an understanding that Iran has capabilities that are far beyond what Israel has experienced from the Houthis and even Hezbollah. So no one takes it very lightly. There have been 3 fatalities so far and a number of buildings destroyed or badly damaged. It's significant, but I think overall in Israel, the mood is one of cautious optimism about success in a mission that enjoys consensus, pretty much, in a country otherwise riven on almost every conceivable issue. So Israelis don't agree on much, but that Iran's Islamic Republic government should not have a nuclear weapon is perhaps the only thing they can come around.
Of course, whether or not Iran does indeed have a nuclear weapon or was close to getting a nuclear weapon is still out for debate, I guess. I mean, Israel sees this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to destroy Iran's nuclear program, whatever stage it may be in, and destroy any retaliatory capabilities also. Presumably, Dan, that means he needs to keep going. But there's no tidy way to end this war. What would victory look like? How far is far enough for Netanyahu?
They need to be able to say that they degraded the program very significantly, such that it's been set back months or years. The major issue, I think, that may end up unresolved is the underground facility in Fordo, which I don't think they have yet attacked, despite some what appears to be misinformation to the contrary coming from Iran. True victory, I think, would be the collapse of the regime in Iran. I have to say it's not a stated goal of this operation, but I do believe that if that happens, people in Israel, a lot of people in the U.S., and my own assessment, based on some knowledge, is probably most people in Iran would feel that this would be a good development for the region and might set the entire region on a path towards peace. Obviously, that's not especially likely. The major question is whether the U.S. gets drawn into it. I'm a little bit apart from other commentators on this issue in that I don't lend any credence to statements coming out of Washington about displeasure with this or some distance from this. I don't think Israel would have dared to launch this fairly comprehensive and multi-pronged attack in the middle of talks between Iran and the U.S., essentially scuttling those talks without, at the very least, acquiescence of the White House, and probably a lot more.
Whether or not Iran, of course, has a nuclear program, as I mentioned earlier, is still a subject of fierce debate. Nevertheless, it is widely received that Israel does have an active nuclear program. It has never signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is not subject to any kind of transparent investigation by international bodies such as the IAEA. Of course, there's no doubt a huge concern in Iran about Israel's capabilities, not only against Iran itself, but across the entire region. What does Israel make of its own military and nuclear capabilities and capacities, given this increased tensions with Iran?
Well, obviously, they never formally admitted that they have nuclear weapons. Look, Israel would say that that Iran might consider who it is belligerent against. And if they want to be belligerent against a very powerful military, then that is their miscalculation. Israel, if it achieved nuclear weapon capability in the 1960s, as is widely believed, did that essentially from a position where it was very, very clearly threatened. Its existence was threatened and endangered by pretty much every single one of the neighboring countries. And that was not some paranoia. And it did not have to do with antipathy towards its regime, the way the Islamic Republic can claim that it itself faces belligerence, but the very existence of the country. No one threatens the country of Iran. Israel was definitely threatened. Whether the process was correct or not, you know, I mean, the countries that acquired nuclear weapons did it in their own various ways, generally through the skullduggeries, and there's at least one regime that should never have been allowed to have nuclear weapons.
Okay. My question, Dan, is whether any of this actually makes Israel any safer. There is a danger here, isn't there? Iran can say, we signed up to the JCPOA in 2015 after 8 years of negotiations. We were ready to talk to the Americans and cut a deal now. What options do we have but to go ahead with a nuclear program? I guess they're going to be asking themselves, with or without permission from the West. My question is, if Iran does pursue a nuclear bomb, to what extent will Netanyahu be to blame for that?
I don't think Netanyahu needs Israel's encouragement to pursue a nuclear weapon. They have been doing it for about 30 years. I assess that Israel will do everything conceivable to prevent that outcome, and they're not really open to discussions about the fairness of them having a weapon. Why should Iran not have a weapon? Israel doesn't threaten Iran. As far as I know, no one threatens Iran other than many, many years ago, Saddam Hussein. And even then, it was not a question of Iran's existence. So I think Israel and much of the world would advise Iran to go about its business, maybe install democracy, and cease trying to achieve nuclear weapons capability. If they deny they're doing it, which I know they are, they should, Israel would say, and the U.S. has been saying, open themselves up to significant, real, comprehensive inspections.
Netanyahu has ordered the closure of embassies and consulates, which sounds, I guess, like a reasonable response, but he's also told Jews not to display their religious identity in public around the world. I mean, contrary to popular belief, there's a very large and vibrant Jewish community in Iran that's been there for 2,700 years. There are synagogues where people worship openly and freely in Iran. Is Netanyahu once again trying to conflate the deeds of the Israeli government with Jewishness?
I think there's a real danger to Jews around the world in such contexts. And you don't need any particular political leader to conflate anything in order to see, an Egyptian citizen attacking Jews in Boulder over issues to do with the conflict in the Middle East. This occurs. So whether Israel brings it about through its own bellicosity is an open debate, and Israel would always claim that they're acting in self-defense. But are Jews around the world potentially in danger because of anger directed at Israel and the Jews? Of course they are. I think defensive measures and precautions are necessary and justified, and I wouldn't be looking at conspiracy theory.
Politician in the U.S. state of Minnesota has been killed. Another has been injured after they were both shot in their separate homes. State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband have been killed, while State Senator John Hoffman and his wife are recovering after surgery. Now, police are searching for the suspect who escaped after a shootout with officers. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said it was an act of political violence.
We're here today because an unspeakable tragedy has unfolded in Minnesota. My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination. Our state lost a great leader, and I lost the dearest of friends. Speaker Hortman was someone who served the people of Minnesota with grace, compassion, humor, and a sense of service. She was a formidable public servant, a fixture and a giant in Minnesota. She woke up every day determined to make this state a better place. She is irreplaceable, and we've been missed by so many. Minnesota's thoughts and prayers are with her family, her loved ones, her children, and her parents. My prayers also go out to State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, who were each shot multiple times. The Hoffmans are out of surgery at this time and receiving care, and we are cautiously optimistic they will survive this assassination attempt. This was an act of targeted political violence. Peaceful discourse is the foundation of our democracy. We don't settle our differences with violence or at gunpoint. In the state of Minnesota, and as recently as last week, in the most closely divided state legislature in the country, we sat down, we worked things out, we debated, we shook hands and compromised, and we served the state of Minnesota together. We proved that it's possible, even in these politically charged times, to find compromise and adhere to the principles of democracy and civil discourse. We must all, Minnesota and across the country, stand against all forms of political violence.
So Minnesota Governor there, Tim Walz, with that news that a U.S. politician, State Representative Melissa Hortman, and her husband have been killed. And in a separate shooting, Senator John Hoffman and his wife are recovering after surgery. Police are searching for the suspect who escaped after what's described as a shootout with officers.
India's government is urgently inspecting all Boeing 787s after a devastating Air India crash that claimed at least 270 lives this week. That's according to Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu, who led a moment of silence for those who died in the disaster at a press conference on Saturday.
The recovery of the black box yesterday around 5 p.m.
He added that the authorities were investigating all possible causes. On Friday, the aviation regulator ordered Air India to conduct additional maintenance checks on its Boeing 787-8 and 9 aircraft equipped with GE/NX engines. Air India operates 33 Boeing 787s, and rival airline Indigo has one, according to data from Flight Radar 24. The planes have not been grounded, but a source on Friday told Reuters the Indian government was considering that as an option. Air India and the Indian government are looking at several aspects of the crash, including issues linked to its engine thrust, flaps, and why the landing gear remained open as the plane took off and then came down. The Boeing 787-8 Streamliner, bound for Britain's Gatwick Airport with 242 people on board, began losing height seconds after takeoff on Thursday. It then erupted in a fireball as it hit buildings below in what has been the world's worst aviation disaster in a decade. Only one of the passengers and crew on board survived, while others were killed as the plane struck a medical college's hostel as it came down. The crisis has cast a shadow on Air India, which has for years struggled to rebuild its reputation and revamp its fleet. Meanwhile, anxious family members await news of their loved ones, with some hoping to collect the bodies of those killed in the crash. Some say they have been told by authorities that it will take 72 hours for DNA profiling. Imtiaz Syed Ali says his brother was on the flight when it crashed. He says he came to give a DNA sample to help identify those who died, but added he does not trust the process. I have this mental urge to see the body of my deceased brother, he says. That is when I will accept that this is my brother and he is dead. Most bodies in the crash were badly charred, and authorities say they are using dental samples to run identification checks.
Stocks fell across the board Friday after more clashes in the Middle East, with the Dow dropping about 1.8%, the S&P 500 more than 1%, and the Nasdaq declining 1.3%. Iran launched missiles at Israel in response to intensive Israeli strikes aimed at crippling Tehran's ability to build nuclear weapons. Airline stocks fell on fears that fuel costs could climb, while defense stocks such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman rose. Melissa Brown, managing director of investment decision research at SimCorp, says she thinks the effect of the conflict may be short-lived.
Over the long term, I've seen studies that show that that wars generally don't have a major impact on stock markets over, say a period of a few months to a few years, with some obvious exceptions. If we don't see a huge escalation, particularly outside of the borders where we're already seeing the conflict, I think that investors are going to go back to the idea that the Fed's going to lower rates, that we're not going to be in a recession. And even with somewhat higher oil prices, we managed quite well with higher oil prices for the past few years.
Other stocks on the move included Photoshop maker Adobe, which lost more than 5%. The company raised its annual revenue forecast, but that was overshadowed by concerns that the pace of its AI adoption was too slow. And shares of Oracle jumped more than 7.5% to hit a record high. The stock is now up more than 21% in the 2 days since the technology company gave an upbeat forecast, driven by demand for its AI services.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were navigating the tides of climate finance, St. Kitts and Nevis at Global Sustainability Forums. St. Kitts and Nevis Defense Force partnership bolsters inmate rehabilitation efforts. Autopsy reveals cause of death in Ponce Pasha fatal shooting. Port lessons for Jamaica from China. CDB annual meeting ends with strong call for regional resilience. Internationally, Israeli public united in mission to halt Iran's nuclear program. Thank you for listening.